meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back to Light Talk, where the paranormal and the supernatural is a part of our everyday lives. Today, I'm excited. We've got some great guests here. Today, I have two guests, so we're going to go ahead and get started so we can get as many stories in as possible. So, welcome to the show, you guys, and go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Great. Well, first of all, thanks for having us today. We're excited to be on your podcast. I hope your guests are going to be really pleased with what they hear. So my name is Ed Wilson, and I have a different background from most UFO researchers. Originally, I was a historian and a rare book and document dealer, but that was only until I rediscovered what is the most important piece of NASA photography ever. It's called the Simpkinson NASA UFO. The only reason it's is because NASA's original Space Task Group chief engineer, Scott Simpkinson, preserved it in his personal archive, where it sat untouched in the family basement since 1996. It's from 1966. The only reason that it survived was a fluke, but when I first saw it, one thing became obviously immediately. It's an indisputable flying saucer. It's a shocking image, so shocking I began cross-checking it against NASA's own material. And what I found was this. The lithograph wasn't an isolated incident. The same object shows up again in NASA official Gemini 11 Hasselblad photographs. And again in the never-seen 16,000 frame RCA D15 mission film, which I recovered from the National Archives. When you line all of this up, the secret lithograph, the public NASA photos, the hidden RCA camera footage, the object matches across all of them. Different angles, different lighting, different cameras, but the same craft. We're not dealing with a single frame. We're dealing with a documented sequence of events NASA never intended the public to see. This isn't folklore. This isn't a story someone told somebody. This is forensic, archival, scientific evidence. We have astronaut voice transcripts reporting weird craft in real time. We have NASA's technical debriefing, where the astronauts deny seeing any anomalies except one, the anomaly that occurred during the D15 battery failure. We have a 6-minute communications gap, a classic signature marker in NASA anomalous events. And we have a perfect, indisputable cloud pattern match between the lithograph and NASA's own frame S66545585. A scientifically verifiable match that proves the lithograph originated from a real Gemini 11 photograph, and your own eyes, they're not going to lie to you. We have timestamp artifacts on the RCA film that indicate missing digital frames that should exist, but they don't. And this is incredible. And you can read it for yourself, word for word, in NASA's own Johnson Space Center oral history. This is the testimony from NASA legendary photographic director Richard Underwood. In his official oral history interview, he states clearly that no one outside a small security cleared group has ever seen a first-generation NASA photograph. Every image the public has ever seen, every image researchers have ever seen, every image you've ever seen, and Congress too, is from a third-generation negative. Make sure you understand what this means. It means we have never, ever seen the original NASA negatives. So when you take all of this together, the lost lithograph, matching Hasselblad photos, the 16,000 frames of hidden RCA footage, the astronaut transcripts, the cloud pattern verification, the missing timestamps, the National Archives recovery, the CIA MPIC duplication systems we now know were in operation, you have something NASA can no longer explain away. The craft in these frames are not lights. They are not lens flares. They are not reflections. They are structured objects photographed by NASA across multiple camera systems in 1966. It's all 100% NASA imagery. Don't take my word for it. Follow the NASA trail and believe your own eyes. The American public deserves transparency, and that's why I'm here.
Wonderful.
Good.
That?
Good. My name is Seth. I helped him investigate the thing. This is quite an interesting case. I have to concur with Ed. And it's an ongoing investigation too. I think that a lot of things on their surface appear to be something else than what they are, maybe upon deeper inspection or further contemplation. So I think this is one of those things that requires a bit of a discerning eye, and it's really remarkable once you really start digging through the sources and checking out some of the. It's true. There's been a wealth of information that we've discovered, some of which wasn't seen before from the National Archives, and it does appear to. There are some anomalies at play that aren't easily explained with the Gemini 11 mission.
Wonderful. Seth's too modest. He does a lot of research on his own. I believe he went to Utah last year to do some independent filming on totally different subjects, but all by himself. So he's turning out to be a real UFO investigator that contributes a lot of the sobriety to my sometimes wild speculations, but they're not really that wild, as I hope to show you today. So anyways, Dana, is there anything you'd like to hear about first? Or else I'll just start rattling it off.
Start right in and we'll just go with it.
Great. That's
well,
great.
Let's start, Ed, if I can suggest with mentioning where you got the photo in the first place and a little bit about Scott Simpkinson.
Perfect. That's a great start.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm really a rare book and document dealer, and I've made my career out of going to auctions and basically, I like to call it grave robbing. I'm being humorous in that situation. When people die, a lot of the things that they've done in their life end up in strangers' hands, and that's what happened with this instance. I went to an auction, and it was advertised as Emily Ertl's space auction. She was supposedly, and it turns out she was an employee of NASA during the early days. It was tremendous. There were just hundreds and hundreds of items, all NASA got verified. I went there and I bought a lot of her stuff because it was, I realized, rare documents. Specifically, I bought, but incidentally, you can see in the book, it turns out Emily was the very first female employee at NASA Cape Canaveral. We have a nice newsletter there. The book is filled with pictures and documents. And the reason it's filled with pictures and documents because it really serves twofold. Number one, I bought 31 binders from the auction of NASA photographs, all broken down into one binder for every manned Gemini or every manned space mission, starting in 1958, before NASA even was formed. And it was the Mercury program, for those who aren't familiar, was the first manned program, nine launches, successful launches there, followed by the Gemini program. The Gemini had 12 missions, and then finally the Apollo mission, which ended up with Apollo 17. All these missions happened before the end of 1970. So we're starting out in 1958, and in these documents, I managed to find 536, I believe, original NASA photos. And what turns out to be the amazing thing that no one recognized until I purchased everything was it was not the Emily Ertl archive. Emily Ertl was the first female employee at NASA, but she was also the girlfriend of Scott Simpkinson. And you will see tremendous photos in there. Scott Simpkinson was the very first, he worked for NACA. Before there was a NASA, there was NACA. He started in 1943. And he was involved with, he started out with airplane propellers during that point. But after 1947, he was involved with the V-2 missiles. And believe it or not, we're really close to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where purportedly the Roswell Incident Refuge took over. Let me just show you this right here, see if you can see it. Seth will send you some pictures. But what you're seeing right there, that's from 1958. You see the lovely woman in the center, that's Emily Ertl. And she's nestled into the arms of the somewhat chunky fellow, kind of looks like me. That's Scott Simpkinson. He was the designated group leader or lead engineer for the entire NACA program that went down to Florida when there was no NASA down there, basically just a bunch of swamps that they were trying to clear to make a Cape Canaveral. And He led that group. You see right in the background of that picture is the very first ever Mercury space capsule, 1958. The picture was taken in Cleveland because Lewis Field, where NACA was headquartered, was up in Cleveland. And they had to transfer those guys down there. And that is the foundation that NASA was made from. That and the Langley engineers, plus some of the guys from JPL, I believe it was, out in California. Those three groups converged to make NASA. And of those 536 photos that I took, I just want you to know, with a quick idea of how important these photos are in the book that you're about to see. I sold, of those 586 photos, I think I sold 230 of them. Okay, I kept the most important ones as a historian, but the 230 that I sold from the Gemini and the Apollo mission brought in 2024 over $80,000. Okay, $80,000 for these 200 photos. What you're getting in this book, you're going to see the best of history that's out there, and you're going to see the only archive of its kind from the guy who started NASA. He built the control rooms that you will see in the pictures. He met with Ike Eisenhower, and they had some wonderful photos in there. He was a major player. And so when you think about how much those photos brought, then what you're going to see is the one of a kind, which I kept and will not sell. And that's the original Mercury photo. There were 17 missions in the Mercury program. And these guys were super brave because of those 17 missions. 9 of them were manned. You'll see images of all the rockets. You'll see Scott Simpkinson with the astronauts as they're standing on the gantries and they're looking up at these remarkable vehicles in 1966, which, by the way, just because it's hard for a lot of you to imagine what it was like back in 1966. There were no computers, there were no laptops, there were no cell phones, and in fact, there was no transcontinental television programs from Europe to the United States until 1964. That was the first television satellite. I remember watching the Winter Olympics. I think it was from Innsbruck or something like that on a black and white TV. And this was 6 years before that. So this goes back to a time period when you'll see in there these NASA capsules on the back of pickup trucks. Okay, that's what they were using. And you saw the photo I showed you where they were all standing in front of it. It looks like an old garage somewhere that they built that thing in. Well, these were very, very primitive times, and they're so primitive. I need to get that across to everybody that it's a miracle that they were able to do what they did. I kept the Mercury photos, and it's a one-of-a-kind archive because he was the guy in charge. He built the blockhouses. You will see the blockhouses he launched those Mercuries from. You will see also, like I said, all the astronauts, and you will see secret images there too. Remember, this guy was the head engineer. And the thing about their Mercury program was there were 17 missions. People don't even realize there were 17 of them because a full 7 of them blew up right in front of their eyes. Some of them blew up right on the gantry. Some of them rose 6 inches and then fell back down and blew up. Some of them blew up in midair. And every one of those blown up missions, they collected the debris and they looked at the apparatus that they had built with their own hands. Fantastic, one secret pictures. Nowhere else. You won't get this anywhere else. It's in this archive. And you'll be amazed also to see in there that we have the complete journal of the newspaper articles that went through all 3 of those programs. What's amazing, and you need to understand, is there was no internet. There was no quick communication. So what Emily Ertl was tasked to do as the secretary for that entire group of people was, with every launch, they didn't have a quick source of information. All they had to go on was the Associated Press articles that appeared in newspapers across the world. And she meticulously clipped out every one of them for every mission. And you can read the actual history, which is so fascinating. These guys, you know how much the astronauts in the Mercury thing made? They made about $5 for a flight. So to risk their lives jumping those oil cans on top of those rockets that they just watched 8 of them blow up in front of their eyes, they got $5. And these guys were married. They were family men, but they were thrill seekers, and they were courageous beyond imagination to sit there and watch those things blow up and then to jump in into that little oil drum size capsule and get shot into space. It's amazing courage. But they had families, and this is an interesting story also. For $5 a day, that's all they could get paid. And they couldn't get insurance for these flights that they did in outer space. So you read the newspaper articles about it, and what you find out is they were trying to find a way that they could make sure the families were taken care of if a horrible accident happened. Scott Simpkinson, it turns out, was a stamp collector, and this is an interesting thing that he did. He realized that no insurance company is going to insure these guys, and these guys, they're not going to be provided with a good pension for their families if anything happens. So he's the one who came up with the idea, and there'll be a lot of you collectors out there that are going to recognize what I'm telling you now. He's the one who came up with the idea of limited edition first edition envelopes for each mission. And what they did was they printed up first edition envelopes and first edition stamps for each one of the missions that would fly, and they still do it today. And they made a limited number of them, and each astronaut got around 50 to 150 of those envelopes. And they signed them before they went up, because if they didn't come back, those would be the only envelopes ever signed by them on that mission. And they were the property of the families that they were leaving behind. What an interesting way. What a way to circumnavigate around these horrible problems. The problems NASA overcame were amazing. No one knew any of the technical details of how we can build these spacecrafts, but this is just the kind of ingenuity that they did, that they wrapped around, and they worked around the problem. Sure, the guy's making $5 an hour, and if he dies, his family's going to be out there with no insurance because no insurance company will take him. Tell you what, we'll solve the problem. We'll make first edition letters that they will sign belong to the family, and of course will be extremely valuable if anything bad happens. What a wraparound way to solve a problem. But they did all of these wraparound solutions. The first mission that you see right there that Scott Simpkinson was in charge of, what's called the Big John mission. They didn't even know how to make a re-entry shield. They were experimenting with titanium heat shields, okay? Number one, titanium is incredibly expensive. And number two, it's incredibly heavy. And there was no way that was going to be a solution. So it was the ablative shields that they tested on the very first one that made everything else possible. So what you will see when you get the book is you will look at those photographs. You can read those newspaper articles. And the reason I am so psyched about this part of it, the rest of it is great. You're going to love the facts, the UFO, all that stuff is great. But I'm a historian, first of all, and I just want you to know you're not going to find another archive of these actual photographs. Scott was the guy who was there, and he had them all. Emily was the secretary who was there, and she did the official NASA recording of all of these newspaper articles. So what you're seeing in there is a one of a kind, and it's the best. And because I'm a historian, it's nice to get the letter ones. The ones that I sold, right? When $80,000, well, guess what? They're common. Why are they common? Because that's after the first series of spacecraft were launched, and that's when the real photography took place. That's when they had solved most of the problems of getting photography in space. John Glenn, on his first 3 orbits around the world, it's the first American to orbit space, he took with him a little brownie camera that he bought up at the drugstore on the way to Cape Canaveral. And the reason he did was because they didn't provide him with a camera, and he wanted to get pictures of it. And they had to wait. The rockets were so inadequate for powering these things into orbit that he only had less than half a pound of personal property that he could take out. He took that little brownie camera. And thank goodness for that, because those are historic images. Now, and those are not in this. Okay, if they were in here, that was the personal property of his family. So what we have in here, the NASA photos. But this is a tremendous historical archive. It's like taking a picture of, say, of the immigrants coming across into, let's say, New York City in 1890 or something like that. Those are wonderful pictures. They're historically great. But what these are that you're going to get in this book are the pictures that would be the building of the Nina, the Penta, and the Santa Maria. You're not find photos like this anywhere else. It's a special archive. And enough of that. So that's to give you an idea. That's where we found the images, and there are documents in there too. So there's a plethora of wonderful information that came in there. But as
Can
I
I
said,
interject that?
yeah, it wasn't until we got to, so I had to catalog everything that was photographed. My job is to catalog everything, achieve an estimate of the value of it, and then of course to sell it. I'm a rare document dealer, and I knew this was great stuff.
I'm
What
sorry, I'm
I
not sure
just
if it was going through on Dana's end. I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
oh, I'm yeah, and it's good that I get answer too.
No, here. Well, so alongside all of these astounding historic NASA materials passed on from Scott Simpkinson, one of NASA's very first most chief engineers, to Emily Ertl, onto her stepson, who auctioned them off to Ed. Right in the back of this binder was, of course, the Simpkinson NASA archived UFO, this astounding picture of a flying saucer hovering over the curved surface of the Earth in outer space.
Yes, and you'll. I'm sure Seth will send you some photos, but just to see, kids, there's what you're going to see right there. You see the UFO there hovering above the. That's the book. Okay, it's about 627 pages. So this is a massive tome. There's just I could have made it 900 some pages, but I just had to be more reasonable and only use the scientists that I could fit in there after all the other analysis that we did. The back of the Gemini 11 binder, the very last page, I came upon the lithograph. Everything was enclosed in archivally correct plastic sheaths to ensure that they lasted. She was a very good secretary and made sure that this stuff was saved for posterity. The lithograph itself is about 6 inches by 9 inches. And it's actually, when you get to the original Gemini mission report, and of course, all these documents are online, so that's why you need this book. You'll see the images in the book of all the reports we have. We have the original Gemini 11 mission reports. That mission report right there is probably 380 pages long, and inside them you will see the exact format of about 20 pages. That looks like that. It says unclassified. And then, of course, the bottom of this says strange object is seen during the Gemini 11 flight. Unclassified, that's the format that you find in that mission report. Now, that mission report, you can look it up online. You could download it. I've read the whole thing several times, gleaning it for information. That whole report was secret for 12 years. It's right on the cover. The cover is in the book. Read it for yourself. So in 1966, about, I guess it would be October of 66, when they produced this 380-page report, right across the front, it says, classified, do not release. Must be classified for 12 years. So for 12 years, no one was able to read the mission report and the details in it. We also have, and you can get these online too. I've copied them myself, the actual debriefings. Now, I was never in the military, but I've watched enough military movies that I know what a debriefing is. You get back from getting shot at by the enemy, and then you have to debrief and say exactly what you learned there before you forget any of the information. And in the debriefing, we had the tremendous line where they talk about the UFO incident that started the whole thing off. So let me backtrack just a little bit. And well, no, actually, Seth, I lost track. Where should I go next?
Let's look into the investigation, because of course, once you crack open this binder and find that alongside a bunch of otherwise innocent NASA materials is an outstanding photo of a UFO, your first question is that real? So I believe, and this was before I came along, but one of the first things you probably did was look online for the transcripts from the mission.
That's exactly right. When I saw that, I mean, it's an astounding photo. And I could tell already that this guy was the real thing. This guy was a forgotten hero of the creation of NASA. So what was this doing in there? But there was no explanation of it. And I didn't know anything about the secret mission reports or the secret debriefings yet. So the first thing I thought was, well, if I had been an astronaut on this Gemini 11 mission and I saw something like that out my window, I don't care what I had been trained to do. I would have said something like, "Wow, did you see that?" And so I
Right.
said, I'm going to go to the Voice Archives, and I did. So I went to the Voice Archives, and again, you can download these too, and we have the exact instances
These are free
highlighted in the
online.
book. Oh, good. Yeah, you can bring them up. We have the instances that I came across. I found about 6 different references to UFOs in the testament, in the text of their transcripts. Uh, 3 of them were a part that was in the Gemini 11 mission that was proven to be the proton rocket. So they saw the proton rocket from Russia re-entering the atmosphere from 4 miles away, and that became one of the first things you'll see if you ever do any research on UFOs in the Gemini 11 mission. But they proved that later. In fact, Richard Underwood is the guy who got actually solved it and proved that it was 4 miles away and not 200 miles. Yada yada yada. But so well, now I've lost track. I'm sorry for being so old, guys, but there's just so much information that I would like to get you to
You're
understand.
doing fine.
Well,
Doing
what was I
fine.
talking about, Seth?
Yes, so I was just trying to find the transcripts. They're escaping me at the moment. But one of the interesting things about these transcripts was the 6-minute gap.
Yeah, the 6 minute gap. So we have 5 scientists' actual reports, word for word, verbatim, in the back 200 pages of the book. I think they were kind enough to look into it and try and research it, and they were perplexed as I was. Everybody was perplexed, and I'm trying to track it down. So first, I tracked the voice transcripts down, and here's the amazing thing that came up. I finally realized, after speaking with Richard Haynes, the founder of Narcan. Okay, not Narcan, NARCAP, and a former. He was a psychologist for NASA back in '66 during his mission. He opened up investigations into UFOs very early because all the pilots were asking for a place where they could report this stuff. So Narcan was him, and he also contributed an 80-page beautiful photographic essay of a UFO from 1966 down in Chile. So that's the only non-NASA photos that are in the book. But what I learned was that there were 3 important incidents where they mentioned seeing something anomalous. Well, the first one basically says like, "Hey, did something just fly over your head out there?" And the pilot replies, "Yeah, something just did." And the other guy says, "Well, let's turn around and go back and look what things were going on there." But then the second that they said that, the minute within a minute that they mentioned seeing the UFO fly over their window, and what is that? Within 1 minute of that, NASA gets on the line to them, and NASA says, "Hey, will you check your Stack 2C Charlie down in the lower left-hand corner of the module?" And the guys stop what they're doing in the voice transcripts, and they say, "Yeah, sure, we'll check it. It's down here on the left, and gee, we've got 0 volts and 0 amps." So that's within 1 minute of them seeing the UFO out the window. Now, everybody who's been interested in UFOs for all these years certainly will recognize that it's absolutely a classic signature of UFOs when they're around electromagnetic. Yes, thank you. The UFO electromagnetic thing. Cars die right on the road, don't they? I'm sure all you people out there have heard those stories. I've heard them for years too. Well, believe you me, was I amazed. It took me a long period of time of reading these transcripts over and over again from cover to cover to try and ascertain this evidence that I finally said, "Well, what is this Stack 2C Charlie?" And I looked it up. My gosh, it's the battery for the spaceship. Now, fortunately, there were 6 of them to back it up, but one of the batteries within 1 minute of the UFO passing out their window ceased to work, went dead, just like every UAP incident.
I think it's probably worth noting for posterity here that we don't know with 100%, at least I'm not 100% convinced we know exactly when the UFO passed by. Now, what that's based on is on the 6-minute gap. Now, there's a fair likelihood that the UFO was bugging them during that 6
Well, no,
minute
we do
gap.
know when it passed by. Seth, we do know when it passed by because the voice transcripts, you have to understand, when you see the voice transcripts, they're down to the second. Okay. So we have the exact hour, the exact minute, and the exact second that they pass by. When they say, "What was that flew over your window?" Boom. Yes, that is the exact hour, the exact minute, and the exact second. Okay. So we do have that. that's the interesting thing about all these NASA documents. Everything is verified for scientific accuracy for them to be able to decipher what might have happened, what experiments were occurring, when, at exact time, where it was. All these things have to be very specific. So, yes,
one of the
we
most
do.
interesting parts about this 6-minute gap was that just after it ended, they mentioned as to whether or not the recording was on, which is a turn of phrase that you wouldn't necessarily expect if
unless you turned it off.
Back on, yeah, which was strange. So it was a bit of weird wording. Somebody can go and reference themselves what that exact wording was. But what Ed went ahead and found after that was that in the Gemini 10 mission, the preceding mission, there was actually some evidence that another kind of suspect portion of a transcript where they said, make sure that you censor these when you get back down, which is
right
strange.
In the transcript, Seth, you're right.
They can, or routinely perhaps, or at least occasionally, or at least they've been known to censor these NASA transcripts. So that 6-minute gap within the official transcript may just be evidence that they were discussing openly that they just saw something that they didn't know what the hell it was outside their window. And they didn't want that going out into the mission report or into the transcript that was going to be released to the public.
Yeah,
I'm glad.
Yeah,
Seth, that was great that Seth brought that up. That's in the book too. Seth has got all this information, and he's a wealthy. At the end, I hope you'll portray his website that he's hooked up for all the information that we need people out there to continue this investigation. And actually, you can learn a lot here because I've dealt with. I mean, all the scientists that you will see in the credits, the 5 of them, you know who they are. Okay, these are famous UFO scientists. Okay, I've had help from journalists. Probably the most famous journalist of all has helped me with this. So I won't mention them here at this point, but you'll see them in the book, and you will be able to read their own scientific analyses. Okay, and see how you do science properly, and that's what we're trying to do, and what we've tried to do here. So that's what we have in the book here. Those are some of the things. The first book was basically that. The first book, those 600 pages, was basically trying to find evidence to explain where this lithograph might have come from. Now, of course, I'm a rare book and document dealer, so I know what a lithograph is. Kids, a lithograph is something that you can make a cheap copy of an actual photograph from, or from an actual photograph. You can make an actual lithograph from it, and it'll be a cheap and not very highly detailed image. All these images here, when you see this thing and when you magnify it, you'll be amazed at the details that do come out of it. But why would they make a lithograph? They had the best cameras on Earth. Well, it turns out there is good reasons for that. But that's what the first book is about. The first book brings it down to where I actually locate 3 different instances of them mentioning the UFO, and it's all during 3 orbits, which was during the RCA D15 night image experiment. And that's a great experiment. It's wonderful to know. They did 12 wonderful experiments here. We didn't know anything. And they were going to head to the moon on the very next program missions. So they didn't even know whether they could rendezvous with another capsule in space. The computers were rudimentary. How do you get these things traveling at 16,000 miles per hour to rendezvous with little targets of 40 feet in diameter from clear on the other side of the Earth? And that's what they had to do. So what was best, one of the most important experiments that they did, and the one that was the entire mission success hinged upon, was they had to rendezvous with the Agena target vehicle on the very first orbit. So what they did, they launched the astronauts up, and then before the astronauts even do one orbit, they launched the Agena capsule behind it. That way they're separated by half a globe apart, and they rendezvous, okay? And they rendezvous within one orbit. What's the importance of this? The importance of this is if they can't rendezvous within one orbit on an Earthbound orbital pattern, then they can't send them to the moon, because when they launch that lunar excursion module, the LIM, back into space, they don't have enough gas to do more than one orbit without hooking up with them. So the whole entire lunar missions depended upon them rendezvousing within one orbit, and they did it successfully. And that was the major triumph. The other major triumph, of course, was it was up until I believe it was up until 8 months ago, or else a year and 8 months, since I'm so old and can't keep time straight. It was the highest orbit of any craft ever. This was in 1966, guys. They hooked that Agena up, they turned it around, and they gave it lit the wick on the son of a gun, and they took off, and they made the world record highest orbit, 856 nautical miles high. No one has ever gone that high in an orbit since, except until last year. So until last year, no one even matched or broke that orbit. And of course, that's testing the Agena rocket system to make sure that they can get the thrust enough to get to the moon and then to get back. None of these things were known. They were working at a breakneck speed. The speed was amazing. That 500 or 380 page mission report went to every single one of the engineering departments that helped build that craft. McDonnell Douglas, all of the Bell Laboratories, all these people. Each one of them got at least one copy of that secret report, and that's a nice thing in the back of the binder. In the back of that mission, you'll find 22 pages. Those 22 pages, okay, contain about 280 different departments and vendors that helped build that spacecraft. And they have the name, the address, the number, and because it was classified for 12 years, they had the actual number of copies of that secret 300-page mission report. They had the exact number of copies that went to St. McDonnell Douglas. They got 12 copies there for their engineers there. They got one copy to Admiral such and such in this one. There's 20 pages of those addressed. Every single one of those copies is recognized and listed so that you know the address, you know the department, you know the person they were sent to. And this is the amazing thing. When you put all those pages together just for the mission report alone, you have over 380,000 pages of paper that they had to print. Amazing, huh? Can you imagine 380,000 pages of print that you have to make? And then look at this. Here's what's important from that. Of those three, that's just the one report. Of course, they had the technical debriefings too and many, many others. But of those 500,000 pages that they had to print all together, and they had to get that to the engineering departments who helped build it. They had to read it, and they had to analyze it before the next mission took off in case there was a flaw that they would risk their lives. All that reporting had to be done within 30 days because the Gemini 12 mission happened 1 month later. So you've got 500,000 pages of paper that had to be printed. The Herculean task this was is unbelievable. And we're talking without computers. We're talking about printing machines making printed paper documents. 500,000 pages, okay? And then they have to be dispersed to all these different engineering facilities. And they're secret documents, so they have to count every one of them. You know exactly who got them. And they have to be read by each one of those engineering staff. And they have to be evaluated. And they have to be analyzed before the next launch within 30 days. Is this amazing?
I have a question. Are you zooming in your camera? Have you ever seen this happen, Dana? I've been curious about this the entire time. Your view is actually like zooming in on your face, like in and out. Are you doing that?
Oh, yeah. Hi, guys. Seth is my technical advisor, and he wasn't here to help me set it up. So when I signed on to Zoom here, there was a little button that said, well, do you want an automatic centering thing? And
so I didn't know that was a setting.
Well, I didn't know what it was, but nobody was there but me. And that's because I came early because I wanted to make sure that I could even get that. So yes, automatic zooming.
It's been quite cinematic.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's good. Okay, so since we are going to run out of time eventually, I think what we should do is discuss what I see as the two remaining big picture pieces of the investigation that have come together so far, and then let Dana ask a couple questions.
Cool. Let me start off first of all. That's the first book. The first book, we found the experiment. The second book, I went to.
Don't forget, I think the first book also contains the D15 footage. Does that, or is that in the second?
No. That's the second. The
Yeah,
first
so
book
let's talk
was
about
me
the D15
locating
study.
that something happened during the D15, the three orbits. Thank you, Seth. You're exactly right.
Yeah,
So I determined from all the voice transcripts that, hey, they saw these three UFO incidents occurred within 90 minutes, or three orbits says more, 270 minutes. So within 3 hours, they had strange anomalous voice recordings of, hey, did you see that? Three times. The D15 experiment was a wonderful experiment. It was designed, and specifically, it's interesting how all these things, it turns out the CIA was in on NASA from the very get go. The guys who set up NASA, they were CIA, a long time affiliates.
we still have to talk about Underwood too. We should probably mention.
Underwood, we'll get to, yeah, Underwood is the great story. Like I said, he's the one who tells you flat out, go look in the Johnson Space Center archives. He tells you no one has ever seen more than a third generation negative. So that's true. But the D15 experiment was designed basically also for surveillance. So a little bit of human physiology here. The human eye can adapt to night, okay, but you get night vision only when the retina has had a full time for it to dilate. That takes 20 minutes. So for you to get night vision, if you go outside, you're basically blind for 20 minutes. And then finally your eye is dilated enough that you can have some night vision. Well, the problem with an orbit is 90 minutes around the Earth. And 45 minutes of that is spent in sunlight, where you got to have sunglasses on or visors. And the other 45 minutes is in total darkness behind the Earth. Mm-hmm. Now, these guys were trying to do tasks and jobs during those 45 minutes, and they're night blind for 20 minutes. So for 20 minutes of your 45 minutes of your orbit, you're really incapacitated. The D15 experiment was the very first orthicon tube television ever put into space. It was in the back behind the capsule in the service module, and then they actually had a little flap on the back of the service module, and you'll see all these diagrams of what it was in the book too. The little flap opened up, and that camera pointed down through a periscope onto a mirror, and that's how the D15 movie footage was taken. So, and then the reason was this: those 20 minutes when they're night blind, they can't track targets. They want to be able to track targets, and by targets, we're talking possibly foreign missile bases, perhaps foreign naval yards, things that we don't talk about, and NASA wasn't supposed to be, but that we now know they were doing. So with the television orthicon display tube, they were able to, and they tested it, and it was a great success. They could track objects, and that's what it was all about. So the entire footage from those cameras on the D15 experiment were for him to track targets successfully. And what was this for? Basically, it's for spy missions.
I think that's a good way to frame the entire Gemini series of missions. Was like, and frankly, the race to the moon in general was, in a large part, to my eye, a race to put satellites in orbit so that we can look down upon our rival, the Soviet Union.
Well, you were absolutely right. You said the guy who was in charge of NASA's photograph, Richard Underwood. What was his background, Seth?
He flew the U-2s. The bomber that was that Congress wound up finding was concealed unconstitutionally from the government by these black programs, by these spy companies.
He was in thick with the CIA right from the very beginning, and of course now we've found documents proving from the CIA's own declassified documents that they did not want NASA to be presented as the real CIA operation that it was. Okay, at the time, and Seth knows, and I was raised to think, well, this is a civilian operation. That was some subterfuge that they put out there for PR purposes. Everything was basically controlled by the military intelligence and the civil intelligence of the country. So And this
So
is
one
absolutely right.
fact is that a man named Philip Corso, he wrote a book called The Day After Roswell, where he makes all kind of interesting allegations that some of like modern technology is reverse engineered from alien spacecraft. Now, we don't have to go that far for the purposes of this conversation. One of the things that Corso says in this book regarding Roswell is that well, the U-2 planes, which were concealed unconstitutionally, were actually being used, among other things, for UFO-related reconnaissance. In fact, we wanted to see whether UFOs were crashing in the Soviet Union, basically. We wanted to have eyes on any kind of retrievals that they were doing of non-human technology. So that's what Corso says. And then the one other interesting fact about the U-2s is that the U-2s, the mechanism by which they were concealed from Congress was to basically document them as being unclassified. We're going to say they're unclassified, and then we don't have to report them to Congress, because if we have a classified black program, we've got to report that to Congress. But if we just have an unclassified program, then that can stay right nice and compartmentalized, and it's all on the books. It's all above board, which is actually incidentally kind of how they concealed like ATIP recently in recent times from well, actually, that was just on the books. People just didn't notice it, which was okay. I'm getting sidetracked. So basically,
well, that's excellent, excellent information.
It was classified by being unclassified. It was actually technically unclassified, and Richard Underwood was the one who flew the planes. So what we suspect is that this big unclassified label that is printed underneath the poster, the lithograph that we actually got in the back of Simpkinson's binder, it says unclassified on it. So we suspect that that might be how they concealed this photograph, if it is authentic, by labeling it in the same way as we're aware that they labeled this U-2 program back in the day.
This is all under what you can hear in the heading of
David
Grish's testimony, where he talked about, I can't talk to you. It's about spycraft. All these things are spycraft. Ever since they came up with the secret information, it's been a battle to keep it secret, and especially from guys like congressmen, who, God bless them, they do the best they can, but we're in an awful mess because they're not very good at anything they do. Yes, so this is
yes,
spycraft.
I think, okay, let me bring us, because let me bring us around. Okay, recap on Underwood. Would have had knowledge of the mechanism by which the U-2 probe flew the U-2s, would have had knowledge of the mechanism by which they were concealed, potentially head of all NASA photography, would have seen this photo, and would have been potentially responsible for labeling it.
He's the man who he developed every single photograph. And
there's the Underwood story. Now let's talk about the D-15 footage, though, because just all the way back, we were talking about this footage, because the eyes couldn't adapt fast enough. We want to put a camera up there. We want to put a camera in space. I mean, and obviously you want to put a camera in space anyways if you're the government. So you put a camera in space and you test it on this Gemini 11 mission. It was the first TV camera ever put in space. And well, it took a bunch of footage. It took about 12 minutes worth of footage. And that footage was never before seen until Ed requested it from the National Archives. So what we did was we got this original 12 minutes of footage from this first TV camera from this mission. And Ed went through and meticulously, what he did was look at each and every single frame practically and look for anomalies. And lo and behold, within a frame, there was a string of lights, and this can be found at the link to the sources that I can provide you with, and we can provide your listeners with, a string of lights which very frankly closely resembles the lights shown on the whole of the Simpkinson photograph visible in the lithograph, the binder litho. So that, yes, here is a printout of it being held up to the camera.
You can see the UFO.
Now it's quite small and blurry, but it's very hard to mistake for a lens flare or a camera artifact or what have you.
And look how the light patterns match.
It's curved. It really does match the profile. If we're willing to entertain the idea that this UFO was up there, it really does match the profile of this UFO. And that's not the only string of lights. It's the most remarkable one. It's the one that resembles the closest, but there's a few other frames with lights that could be construed as UFOs if one so wanted to do.
For instance, good. Thanks for taking charge, Seth. I can go on for hours and no one's going to learn a damn thing. But they're right there. There's one.
That's one too. Yeah, that's a good one.
That's the blue saucer. That's in the book. We did a whole analysis of that. That's a D15 footage. Do you see the lights and do you see the outline of the UFO? I don't know if I can.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
That's from the D15 footage. And I did some analysis. Anyways, I've used a lot of analysis that I'm not really qualified to run, but I did it anyways. That's like most of my life. I was never really qualified to do anything, but I go ahead with it. So, Joe, you can take it with a grain of salt, but you can also follow the procedures that I followed and try to duplicate them and see where there might be some failures, but there's also some successes there. But that, plain and simple, that's just a blown up image from the D15 footage. I call it the Blue Saucer. It's all in chapter 6. Chapter 6 of the second book is a full analysis where I tried to match the UFO lithograph light pattern. And that's the thing you're going to see too. When you look at the lights on that UFO, this is what blew everybody away. When they first saw that lithograph, those lights are not even. Those lights are different intensities. They look like they were drawn by like a monkey or something. And everybody said, well, that's a piss poor imitation of something. And it turns out that's not what it was. That's what the UFO is doing. My theories basically are the lights are not portals, really. They seem to be some kind of energy transference mechanism that I believe has to do with the Hull mechanism, how the Hull actually transfers these immense quantities of energy, and it emits light as it happens. So what you're seeing plasmonic type light. Well, of course, that's the other thing in the lithograph too. This lithograph, the UFO, when you look at it, it's surrounded by an aura. Hopefully Seth can get you some pictures so you can bring that. Sure. We didn't have any mention of these auras or anything until recently. They weren't described as having auras, but here in 1966, plain and simple, there's the aura. The same thing that you see in the gimbal photograph. You see the aura surrounding that thing, that famous Wall Street Journal revelation of military footage of the UFO shows that aura. And here it is in 1966 before anyone ever discussed it. So just an amazing, beautiful job. The film footage too, I spent extra money and I had Color Lab, who's the oldest provider of actual downloaded images from the National Archives. I told them I needed the highest grade they could get in reproducing it. So what you're going to see, what Seth has, and Seth is the only guy with computer talent to download the immense information file that this was downloaded onto. I wanted more than they naturally do for the National Archives. I wanted to be sure that we were able to use it for scientific purposes. And so the guy at Color Lab was kind enough to go out and buy me the super high memory cartridges. That's what we used, and that's why no one else is usually very able to download this film. Only Seth, with his immense background, has been able to successfully.
Hey, I found the transcript I was looking for earlier.
Okay, cool. Yeah, bring her up here.
Okay,
Yeah.
here's the timestamps. 54:39. They say something go by your window. Other guy says, yeah, right. So what went by the window begs the question. Then at 54:41, 42-ish, the battery goes out. At 54:42:12, they say might as well turn it off, the battery. And then follows the roughly 6 minutes of silence. Well, they say Roger here 4 minutes later. And then there's about 6 minutes of silence. And the first thing they say after that 6 minutes, where nothing is said, is the tape recorder on? And then about 30 minutes after that, they say again, something real shiny right there, something moving down the scope, not identified as a cloud. Another guy says, kind of weird, kind of weird. And then another 4 minutes after that, they say, what was that flashed and went by? They think that one was a meteor. But
that one was a meteor. The third one's in the book, Seth. Yeah, that's definitely was a meteor. But that just shows what they were trying to do was that
a whole lot of things going by their window out there during a
Yes.
relatively short duration and during this 6 minutes, somewhat suspicious 6 minutes of silence. Well, let us, before we conclude here, move on to the last, I think, really important piece of the investigation to mention, which is the Hasselblad frame. That's a different camera, not the B-15 camera itself, but actually a still frame taken by a different photo of the Agena target vehicle during this launching or during this docking process. Basically, that photo contains an exact cloud pattern match to the photo, to the lithograph itself. Now, that photo, where there should be a UFO, there is only empty space. So this begs the question, and this is the most interesting part of the ongoing investigation. What's the deal? Was the UFO removed from that photo for the official record and for the cover of the mission report, which uses the same frame, or was the UFO superimposed onto the blank photo, making it a hoax? Now that would be, you'd have to contend with all the other evidence that we've discussed, if that's your position. But this is the state of things now. We found the frame that seems to match exactly the pattern, the cloud pattern and the curvature of the Earth and everything of the lithograph. So, like, seemingly we have the frame, we have the photo. The question is, was it removed or was it added? Which is the real one.
So
Very
going
good.
back a little bit, they were saying that they had it confidential for 12 years, right?
You can
So
read it right
what,
on the cover in the book.
The
yeah,
mission
so
report.
what is the meaning for that? Was there any reason for being 12 years and not forever, or what's the
It's a good question.
significance of that?
There's a lot of good significance to that question. Thanks for asking it. What you need to understand is this whole situation that NASA grew up in was just post World War II. The guys who were doing these missions just lived through World War II, a horrendous battle. Many of their family members were dead. Horrible atrocities took place all over the world, and there was no guaranteed ending like we know when we look at movies that the good guys are going to win. This was a terrifying situation. And to be a soldier, I can't imagine the horror that you have to live with. But this is what the guys who formed NASA had lived through. And just as an example, we talk about Richard Underwood. He had been a Seabee and he had been through the war, and they unloaded ammunition boxes onto the beach and the shells were firing. And all of these things were occurring. So he's the guy who worked for the CIA, as Seth pointed out, with the U-2 incidents. He analyzed that film, and here is just how important the world situation is to these guys and why things have to be kept secret. In Richard Underwood's Johnson Space Center testimony, he tells you a wonderful story, and it has to do when he's flying a surveillance mission down in Honduras. And in Honduras, and I believe the mission was at that time, even then, they were trying to detect and measure the magnetic anomalies which are around the Earth. Nothing is flat and smooth. There are huge anomalies that gravitationally change the influence of, say, an ICBM missile being launched. If it goes through that gravitational anomaly, it's not going to hit where you think it's going to hit unless you know and have measured that and locate what how you might be able to mitigate that circumstance. So Underwood is down in Guatemala. They're flying the mission. He comes back from the mission, and there on the tarmac in Guatemala's jungles, working for the CIA, he came across a beautiful young Guatemalan woman. And you can guess the end to this. He married her, right?
Right.
Very good. You say, this looks like a movie that's just going to have a happy ending. Well, this is in his testimony. You can read it word for word from himself. And I love the guy because I love his attitude. Because when he ends what happens, it's like he's going near to the general who did this to him. He got off the tarmac, fell in love, married the Guatemalan girl, And as a member of the CIA and under military control, his general pulled him in and told him this, and you can read it word for word. I should have you shot without a trial right this minute. All because he married a foreigner. That's how serious this stuff was. These are his words. They're not my words. All the stuff you're going to see in these books are documented facts, okay? That's what he told him, but he didn't. So what he did instead was he got demoted from the U-2s and he got put on the B-29s. And as Seth will tell you, he flew like over 6,000 hours on the B-29s away from the U-2s, where he lost the hearing in his ear. That's how dedicated he was to what he was doing. And then, of course, he was discharged from the CIA and went to work for the University of Colorado mining aerial photography, finding natural resources through aerial photography. So that's what he lived through. He was threatened. These guys, this is not bullcrap. These guys' lives are threatened. But as I said, he went near at the end of his testimony, because he points out, and he says it for the record because he wants it known out there. And my wife and I are still married today. We are here in Houston, and my 4 sons are in the process of graduating from college right now. Near, shoot me, will you? I love a guy like that. I love a guy who just stands up to authority. Well, I guess that's every one of us. We're all human, and we all stand up for those things that we believe enough in. And I guess love is overpowering, isn't it? So that's why these things were kept secret. This is a matter of life and death. What's going on today is a matter of life and death. When we look at the wars we're about to enter and that we're entered in all over the world at this moment, whether it's in Ukraine or Venezuela or wherever, we are in dire circumstances all the time. It is the nature of humanity, and it's something that we live with. But these threats are real. And because these threats are real, that's why these things are secret. And now here's the spoiler alert. The next book is in the process right now. I have 4 new Freedom of Information Acts. I've traced down, I've already done 4 or 5 different Freedom of Information Acts for the first 2 books, okay? I have been through those. They've been dead ends. Finally, in the new book that we're working on right now, and the new leads that you're hearing about now, and that these prove that the origin of the lithograph. I have now located from the CIA reading room a series of at least 10 documents. Actually, I've got about 80 pages CIA documents, which are very obtuse and hard to read through, because the one report alone is 80 pages of documents. Just the heading of the documents, 80 pages of it. It's called the HP Automat, and it's from 1956 to 1958. They created a thing in 1956 called the National Photographic Interpretive Center. That was created by the CIA. And the whole purpose of it was, and they worked on the YouTube, the whole purpose of it was to make lithographs for sanitized briefing documents. And what that means is this: you have a top secret image that is a matter of life and death, and they will shoot you if you let that out, because that is important information that can get your neighbor killed. It can get your fellow comrade killed. So that has to be kept secret. But because the military industrial complex is so huge, and because you have to have cooperation between all these units to run these massive organizations, you have to have a way to brief other people without risking the secrecy being revealed. When they, in 1965, on the Gemini 5 mission, they took a series of photographs of the Cape Canaveral facility from which they were launched. And guess what? They did, the CIA did a montage of those photographs, and they came up with an absolute accurate map of the entire Cape Canaveral facility, from which, through magnification, you could determine every single strategic item on that map in that building. Where were the few towers? How big were they? How large were they? How did they erect these gantries? What were the facilities used to build? And even more important than that was an exact map, minute to the inch, where you could use for targeting an ICBM. This stuff's important. That's why the NPIC was created. National Photographic Interpretive Center. It went through 4 different iterations. Today, I believe it's called the NGO, the National Geospatial Organization. So all those records pass through. All these records, they change names of the documents. It's spycraft. It's taking information from one place and putting it into another so that you can't
The way
trace it
I
back.
look at it, it's almost as important today to understand the context of UFO disclosure as a whole, the history that our government has with secrecy around the UFO subject, and the idea that, if there is anything to the modern wave of UFO disclosure that's been ongoing since 2017, then we have to assume that our nation's space agency, NASA, would have known something about this phenomenon all those years ago. So,
so
yeah.
what are you? Sorry.
Nope. No,
So
I
what
was
are
done. Go ahead.
So, what are you guys' thoughts about the government hiding all of this? I mean, a lot of people are saying that it's to protect the people. For some reason, I don't feel like I believe that. So, what are your feelings about why the government is hiding all of this?
Well, it's a secret that goes, I think, a whole lot further back than its modern incarnation. And once you dig under the surface when it comes to UFO lore in particular, you start to see a trend that goes back long before Roswell and the UFO report, the original UFO report by the Air Force. In their modern form, extraterrestrials, beings from the sky, they seem to manifest as flying saucers. There's advanced energy technology. There's advanced mind-body interfaces and seemingly like genetically engineered gray aliens or what have you. And yet, throughout history, long before this kind of modern form, there are reports well documented of beings descending from the sky and interacting with humanity, often gifting them with technology. And some of our earliest myths and legends across cultures pertain to such entities. In addition, there's a whole variety of accounts of folklore related to fae or fairy realms, other kinds of beings, even not necessarily from the sky, but still on kind of the like non-human intelligence kind of wavelength, right? And so I think that when it comes to interpreting government secrecy, you kind of have to strike a balance between considering that, okay, maybe there's some dark stuff, but it's also deeply philosophical and kind of deeply human and like deeply epistemic, where it has to do with our relationship to the unknown and to the like accumulation of new knowledge about the world around us and our kind of ascension into greater or a reality that we understand better.
Well put, well thought out, very nicely put. There's also another aspect to it too, if I will add one more aspect to it that you need to consider. And this is, you go back and you read Machiavelli, okay? This is human nature. And you just see what's going on today in our own government and every government across the world in all these forms. Knowledge is power, and no one gives up power readily. Every dictator who gets his foot in the door does not give up power. It's a human frailty. It's a human fault. I don't say that I'm not guilty of it because thankfully no one ever put me in charge of this stuff, but I can see where I too would not want to relegate power. So it's a tempting thing. And there's a lot of power to be found in this information. This back engineering resulted, according anyways to Corso in his book, it resulted in fiber cable optics. Okay, it resulted in the first germanium microchip. Okay, these are immensely important wealth builders in the world, and it's still going on to this day. And you can back engineer from photographs alone many things. When you look at the UFO that you presented in this book and magnified it a little bit, let your eye get adjusted to where you can see some of the details on the edge of the hall, Even in the degraded state of a lithograph, you will see tessellations and panels on that all. Okay, things can be used to infer engineering, engineering parameters. Okay, you can see things when you look at the lights and you look at the strange pattern and how it looks like it's just a really poorly drawn thing. And when you know, because you have the original photograph, it's not poorly drawn. That's the way they looked. And what you're watching is you're watching some kind of engineering aberration. You're watching what they really are. They're not windows. Okay, there's some kind of energy transfer going on at those spaces, some kind of engine that is making them appear the way that they do. So
When you're
these
looking
things,
at a photograph of light, you're looking at light hitting a receiver.
yes. And when you have the fine photographic detail that we have now on all our spacecraft, well, or for that matter, for our wonderful new James Webb telescope, and you look at the details that you can capture from so far away, you have to realize that any photographic image is going to provide just that kind of detail that these trained people will be able to perhaps derive exactly how that spacecraft works. And if everything that you derive from that is certainly usable for the good, and it's certainly usable for the evil. And that's where we stand.
Interesting stuff. It's interesting stuff. I'd like to open the floor to Dana to ask any final questions. I'm gonna have to get out of here.
Oh, so do you guys, what are your plans for your future after you kind of work through this? Are you looking into any other suspicious situations that are out there?
Well, let me take over here because basically I want you to understand the entire second volume has been submitted to Congress. Okay, you have the House Oversight Committee on UAPs. They're aware. I've been in contact with them for months. Well, actually, I think over a year now. I've been sending them information as I uncover it, trying to present finally enough information that we can bring an exact House Oversight Committee investigation into this particular lithograph that can be linked to a real photograph and will provide the actual evidence that what we have suspected all along is real. So now I'm in the process of starting on the third book. I've got 4 new Freedom of Information Acts out there to the real sources of this information, the CIA, the National Geospatial Organization, the National Archives, and of course NASA. NASA, if you look at those hearings, and if you look at NASA, NASA always tells you the reason the investigations have always been false is because of the spy craft. NASA was never in control of those photos. I've got 10 documented CIA, I don't know, what do you call them? Briefing notes right now, 10 declassified notes going back to 1956 up through 1960 that absolutely detail that NASA did not have control of their negatives. And the CIA guy, Underwood, was well aware, and he's testimony how he did it, that they made one copy from the original negatives, and then apparently the original negatives went to the National Photographic Interpretive Center, and NASA had to ask them to get the copies back. I've got that documented. They're CIA documents. You can read them online in the CIA briefing room. That's why no one has had any success in following up, because no one had the details of how the spy craft worked. Now we know. Every time you ask NASA, they honestly get up there and tell you, well, we absolutely don't have anything like that. And the reason is because they never did. And we've got the documents to prove that now. So that's what's coming up in the third book. That's what's coming up on what I hope will lead to congressional investigation of this lithograph in particular. It's as far as I'm concerned, I'm astounded as to what's been uncovered now. Of course, the whole journey has been a wonderful thing for me. But, my last thought is this. If what you heard tonight sounds extraordinary, Wait until you see it. The real power of this investigation isn't just in the analysis, it's in the images themselves, the film, the photographs, the original NASA evidence that was never meant to be public. The Simpkinson lithograph is just the beginning. The D15 RCA footage from the National Archives, the 16,000 frames NASA never showed the public, will absolutely astound you. Because what we're looking at isn't just a UFO case, it's part of humanity's enlightenment. It's a moment where we finally see what was always right in front of us. Do you want the full story? The documents, the science, the cloud patterns, the timestamps, the oral history testimony? If you want the complete investigation, it's in my books. You have to actually see it for yourselves. And that's what these books are. They're photographs of the documents, photographs of the craft, all visually captured in photographs for you to look at. Believe your own eyes. Listen, kids, I'm an old man here, and I love it, and I lived through these times, and I know exactly how vast a task this was. But I won't be here forever, and there's so much work that needs to be done. And if you believe in synchronicity like I do, if you believe that everything happens for a reason somewhere out there, one of you listening to this program right now, one of you doesn't even know what lies in front of you. And it's your job to pick this mantle up and to carry it through. I won't be here forever. Seth will be here a little bit longer, maybe a little less longer if he hangs around with me too much. But it's up to you guys out there. Somewhere out there, one of you is going to be able to make an advance in this whole field. Somewhere out there, you don't even know it yet. You're listening now. Take a shot. Take a shot. Take over. It's been great for me. You're going to love your life. I want to thank you for your time. Seth, you want to close up?
Yeah, so Dana, if you would be kind enough to forward a link or two onto your audience on whatever platform you upload these to, then I can send a link to a video overview of the investigation, basically containing a kind of condensed summary of some of the stuff, the main points of the investigation
send that over.
today. And then there's also a Google Drive repo that has the sources where people can peruse some of this info for themselves.
Hey, you got to see this stuff. You have got to see what Seth has got. He's got the links to it. You can see the actual NASA photo film. You can see the original footage. All the evidence is there
B-15 footage and a high resolution scan of the lithograph, as well as the sources.
Absolutely, send that over, and we'll put that in the chat or the notes below, so everybody can take a peek at that. And
cool.
Yeah, so that'd be great. That'd be
cool.
wonderful.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, you guys. Well, have a good rest of your night. All right.
You as well.
If anyone else out there has a story you would like to share, email me at lighttalk423@gmail.com, and we'll talk with everyone next time. Thanks for being with us, guys. Bye.